The mark of death, the blistering sun began its slow descent behind the jagged cliffs of the Arizona desert, casting long shadows over the sprawling wilderness. In the fading light, Nayeli crouched low beneath a twisted mesquite tree, her dark eyes scanning the horizon with a mixture of fear and determination. Born into the Apache tribe, Nayeli had known hardship from the start. Her people had fought tirelessly against settlers and soldiers who encroached on their sacred lands. But it wasn't the white man who now posed the gravest threat. It was her own people. Whispers had turned into accusations. Nayeli was a traitor, a woman who had betrayed tribal secrets to the settlers in exchange for her own safety. Whether true or not, the council had sentenced her to death. Her own family's eyes now looked upon her with suspicion and hatred. Nayeli's heart pounded as she remembered. The day the sentence was pronounced, the elders' voices were cold and unyielding. The decision was final. She had been given no chance to defend herself, but she refused to be broken. Under cover of darkness, Nayeli fled, her feet barely making a sound on the rocky earth. She had no destination, only a desperate hope to survive. The desert was unforgiving. Days turned into nights, and each step threatened to sap the last of her strength. Her lips cracked from thirst, and the howling wind tore at her clothes. But her spirit, as fierce as the desert sun, refused to waver. On the edge of this vast wilderness lay a solitary ranch, a patch of cultivated land against the wild backdrop. Here lived Elijah Turner, a man whose life had been shaped by solitude and hard work. Elijah was a rancher by necessity, a loner by nature. His days were spent tending cattle, repairing fences, and navigating the harshness of the frontier. Elijah noticed her first, at dusk, a shadow moving cautiously along the ridge. He was wary. Most strangers brought trouble. But there was something different about this woman. She carried herself with a quiet strength, and her eyes held a story he could not ignore. When Nayeli stumbled toward the ranch, exhausted and weary, Elijah stepped out of the shadows, offering a hand instead of a gun. "Water," he said simply. She accepted, her throat dry and parched. That night, around the crackling fire, Nayeli told her story. The accusations, the betrayal, the sentence. Elijah listened in silence, his jaw set firm. He had seen too much violence, too much cruelty on these lands. He understood what it meant to be judged unfairly. But helping her was dangerous. If the tribe's hunters found Nayeli on his land, there would be consequences. The settlers nearby would see her as a threat, and the soldiers might come searching. Elijah didn't care. For the first time in years, something stirred inside him, a cause worth fighting for. As the stars filled the sky, Nayeli realized she had found an unlikely ally. But the desert held many dangers, and the forces aligned against her were relentless. Together, they would face the coming storm. A fragile alliance. The dawn broke cold and quiet over Elijah Turner's ranch, the desert lights spilling gently across the dry earth and weathered wooden fences. Nayeli sat near the fire pit, the embers still warm beneath the ashes. Her hands trembled slightly as she wrapped a rag around a shallow cut on her wrist, a souvenir from the jagged rocks she'd slipped on during her flight. Elijah worked silently nearby, tending to a stubborn fence post that had been loosened by the relentless wind. The morning ritual grounded him, but today, his mind was far from the familiar rhythms of ranch life. "You can't stay long," he said without looking up. "The tribe's hunters will come looking, and the soldiers too. Both see you as a danger." Nayeli nodded, her dark eyes resolute. "I know, but I have nowhere else to go." Elijah grunted softly. "And what about the settlers? They won't welcome you either. I've faced worse." Her voice was quiet but firm. The rancher paused, wiping sweat from his brow. "This land is my life. If you stay here, it could be taken from me." Nayeli met his gaze. "Then you'd be risking everything for me." Elijah shrugged. "Maybe. Sometimes, doing what's right means risking the things you hold dear." The silence between them was thick, filled with unspoken fears and fragile hope. Elijah had never met anyone like Nayeli, fierce, yet vulnerable. Beneath her defiant exterior, her story had opened a crack in his solitary world, and he found himself wanting to protect her, even if it meant standing against both man and tribe. Meanwhile, beyond the ranch, the winds carried whispers of Nayeli's presence. The Apache hunters were tracking her relentlessly, guided by a mix of anger and duty. Among them was Tawa, a childhood friend turned adversary, who believed Nayeli's death was necessary to restore honor to the tribe. At the same time, rumors reached the nearby settlements. Fear of the unknown stirred the townsfolk. Some called for a posse to capture or kill the woman rumored to be hiding near Elijah's ranch. Others saw a chance to settle old scores under the cover of fear. Elijah knew time was running out. He began fortifying the ranch, repairing fences, stacking wood, and preparing weapons, but he also knew that no physical barrier could shield them from the storm gathering on the horizon. One evening, as the sky darkened with the threat of rain, Nayeli and Elijah sat by the fire, planning their next move. "We can't keep running," Nayeli said, her voice tired but steady. "If I face them, maybe I can explain. Maybe they'll listen." Elijah shook his head. "They want you dead, Nayeli. It's not about listening." She looked away, pain flickering across her face. "Then, what choice do I have?" Elijah reached out, placing a hand over hers. "You have me." That simple touch was a promise of protection, of defiance, of hope. The night deepened, and the stars blinked cold above. In the distance, the howl of wolves echoed, a reminder that the wild was watching, waiting. For Nael and Elijah, survival meant more than just evading death. It meant standing together against a world determined to tear them apart. As dawn approached, they prepared to face whatever came next, bound by a fragile alliance forged in fear and courage. Shadows on the horizon, the morning sun rose hot and unyielding over the desert landscape, illuminating the rugged terrain around Elijah's ranch. The distant mountains seemed to smolder in the heat, their craggy peaks piercing the cloudless sky. Like ancient sentinels watching over a land scarred by conflict, Nayeli moved quietly through the sparse brush beyond the fence line, her senses alert. Every rustle, every bird call, every distant sound put her on edge. She had been here only a few days, but already the weight of being hunted pressed down on her like the desert sun. She wasn't alone. The Apache hunters were closing in. Among them, Toa led the search with a fierce determination born of both duty and betrayal. He had once been Nayeli's closest friend, a brother in arms through years of hardship. But now, he carried the burden of executing the tribe's harsh judgment. Toa's mind wrestled with conflicting emotions. Nayeli had been like a sister, and the accusation that she'd betrayed their people still felt like a cruel wound. But honor demanded justice, and the tribe's law was absolute. As he led the trackers through the arid terrain, Tawa caught sight of the faint trail footprints. Near the ranch, his heart tightened. Back at the ranch, Elijah stood atop a ridge, surveying the vast landscape with a rifle slung over his shoulder. He had fortified the property as best he could, but he knew it was only a matter of time before the hunters found them. Elijah's thoughts drifted to Nayeli. She was out there somewhere, silent and determined, trying to stay one step ahead of death. He admired her strength but worried about her safety. Suddenly, a cloud of dust rose in the distance. The telltale sign of riders. Elijah squinted. It was a small posse, likely settlers and bounty hunters who had heard rumors of a fugitive near the ranch. His jaw tightened. This was turning into a battle on multiple fronts. He hurried to warn Nayeli. Inside the modest cabin, Nayeli was packing a small bag of essentials, dried meat, a water skin, a knife. She wasn't prepared to surrender, but she also knew the time had come to make a choice. "Elijah," she said as he entered, "they're coming. Both sides. We'll face them together." Elijah replied, "I won't let them take you." Nayeli's eyes shone with gratitude and something else, a flicker of trust, she hadn't felt in a long time. They quickly planned their defense, using the land's natural features to their advantage. The rocky outcrops, dry gullies, and sparse vegetation offered some cover, but little else. As the sun climbed higher, the first riders appeared on the horizon, their shapes growing clearer against the shimmering heat. The posse rode with purpose, their faces hard and eyes suspicious. Elijah stepped forward, raising his hands in a gesture of peace. "She's not a threat. Let me talk to you." The leader of the posse, a grizzled man named Carter, narrowed his eyes. "We're looking for a woman, Apache wanted for crimes against settlers. We intend to bring her in." Elijah's voice was steady. "She's here, yes, but she's not what you think. She's not a criminal." Carter spat on the ground. "We don't care for your opinions. Just bring her or we'll take her by force." Before Elijah could respond, Nayeli stepped out from behind the cabin, her posture defiant. "I am Nayeli," she said, her voice ringing clear. "I have done no wrong." The posse murmured among themselves, unsure. Elijah kept his rifle trained, but lowered, signaling calm. Suddenly, a shout from the edge of the ridge cut through the tension. From the direction of the Apache hunters, a group appeared led by Tawa. The two groups froze, the desert silence breaking into an uneasy standoff. Tawa's eyes locked with Nayeli's. "You must come with us," he said. "This is the law." Nayeli shook her head. "I will not die for a crime I did not commit." The standoff was tense, a powder keg waiting for a spark. Elijah stepped between the two sides, raising his voice. "Enough. This isn't the way," Carter sneered. "What's your plan then, rancher?" Elijah met Tawa's gaze, then turned to the posse. "We settle this here, with words, not blood." It was a bold move, but both sides paused, caught between anger and reason. Nayeli spoke, her voice steady and strong. "If I am guilty, let me face a fair trial. Not a death sentence without hearing." The hunters and settlers exchanged uncertain looks. Tawa's face softened for a moment, torn between duty and loyalty. "A trial? Among the tribe?" "Yes," Nayeli replied. "Give me a chance to prove myself." Elijah added, "We all want justice, but it must be fair." The desert wind swept through the gathering, carrying away dust and tension alike. For a brief moment, peace seemed possible. But the shadows on the horizon were long, and the battle for Nayeli's life was far from over. The trial of fire. The dry wind whipped through the rugged canyon as the Apache council gathered under a circle of ancient oak trees. The elders sat solemnly, their weathered faces lined by years of hardship and wisdom. Among them was Tawa, torn between loyalty to his tribe and the lingering bond of friendship with Nayeli. Across from them stood Nayeli herself, her posture defiant yet respectful. The trial was a tradition as old as the land itself, a test of truth and spirit, where words carried as much weight as weapons. Nayeli knew that this was her last chance to prove her innocence and reclaim her place among her people. The sentence of death loomed heavy, but today, she would fight not with arrows or knives, but with courage and honor. Elijah waited at the edge of the village, his heart pounding. Though he was not of their tribe, he understood the gravity of this moment. His presence was a risk. Some saw him as an outsider meddling in affairs he could not grasp. But for Nayeli, he was the only friend she had left. Inside the council circle, Nayeli began her plea. "I am Nayeli," she said, her voice steady and clear. "I have lived among you as daughter, sister, and warrior. I have never betrayed the sacred trust of our people." The elders listened, their eyes piercing. One by one, they questioned her about the accusations, the secrets, the night the tribe was attacked and information lost. Nayeli recounted the events honestly, how she had sought peace between her people and the settlers, hoping to end the bloodshed, how she had been in the wrong place at the wrong time, how she had never given away secrets, but had acted to protect her tribe's future. Some elders were unconvinced. The wounds of the past were deep, and fear clouded their judgment. But others saw the truth in her words, recognizing the bravery it took to stand before them. Outside the council circle, tensions simmered. The settlers and bounty hunters had arrived at the village outskirts, unwilling to wait. Rumors flew. Some demanded immediate justice. Others whispered of treachery. Elijah stood firm, ready to defend Nayeli if the situation erupted into violence. His rifle was loaded, but he hoped it would not come to that as the trial wore on. Nayeli's story unfolded not just in words, but in the silent strength of her spirit. She spoke of loss, of hope, and of the future she dreamed of for both her people and the settlers. Finally, after hours of deliberation, the council called a halt. Tawa rose, his voice heavy with conflict. "Nayeli, the law is clear, but the truth is complex. We will not sentence you to death today. Instead, you will undertake a trial of fire." A hush fell over the gathering. The trial of fire was a test of endurance and spirita, ritual where the accused faced a path through burning embers to prove their innocence and honor. Nayeli's heart raced. She had heard stories of those who walked the fire. Their feet blistered but their spirits unbroken. "I accept," she said firmly. The elders prepared the path, laying down the embers as the sun dipped toward the horizon. Elijah stepped forward, placing a steady hand on Nayeli's shoulder. "You're not alone." The fire glowed bright, casting flickering shadows on the faces of those gathered. Nayeli took a deep breath and stepped forward. Each step was agony, the heat biting through the soles of her moccasins. Her mind focused not on the pain but on the truth she carried inside. Halfway through, a scream of anger and doubt erupted from the crowd. Some elders feared the fire would consume her, but Nayeli pressed on, fueled by the strength of her ancestors. When she reached the end of the path, the crowd was silent. Elijah rushed to her side, seeing the blistered feet but the unbroken spirit. The head elder spoke. She has walked the fire and lived. Nayeli is innocent in the eyes of the law. A murmur of relief and disbelief spread through the crowd. But not everyone was satisfied. Some whispered that the trial was a trick, that Nayeli was still a threat. Tawa's gaze lingered on her, torn between justice and loyalty. That night, as the village settled into uneasy calm, Nayeli and Elijah stood beneath the stars. Tomorrow, the real battle begins, Elijah said softly. Nayeli nodded. But today, I have hope. Betrayal in the dust, the dawn broke pale and cold over the village, its light filtering through a sky streaked with clouds. Nayeli and Elijah stood side by side near the edge of the council grounds. The weight of yesterday's trial still heavy in their hearts. Though the fire trial had spared her life, the fragile peace that had been brokered felt like a thread stretched taut, ready to snap at any moment. Elijah's gaze scanned the horizon, where dust clouds billowed faintly in the distance. Riders were approaching. More trouble, Elijah said grimly. Nayeli nodded, tightening the leather strap on her worn satchel. The settlers are restless. They don't trust the council's decision. Word of Nayeli's survival and the trial had spread quickly. Many settlers feared she was dangerous, and some saw the tribal council's leniency as weakness. Among them was Carter, the posse leader from the ranch, whose suspicion had grown into outright hostility. Elijah knew Carter would not accept anything less than complete submission. As the riders drew near, Nayeli felt a prickling at the back of her neck, a warning, sharp and urgent. Suddenly, from the edge of the crowd, a figure stepped forward. Tawa. Elijah stiffened. Tawa's face was unreadable. I have news, Tawa announced loudly. Nayeli's innocence is not absolute. I have discovered evidence of secret meetings between her and the settlers' plans that may endanger the tribe. The crowd murmured, eyes turning sharply toward Nayeli. She took a deep breath, stepping forward. I have never harmed my people. My goal was peace, not betrayal. Tawa shook his head. Peace cannot come from deceit. Elijah stepped protectively beside Nayeli. And what proof do you have, Tawa? Or is this just fear speaking? Tawa hesitated, then said, there are letters. Messages passed in secret. They say she planned to give away our lands. A murmur of outrage swelled. Nayeli's heart sank. If Tawa's accusations were believed, the death sentence would be reinstated, and with more fury than before. Elijah's eyes narrowed. Show us these letters. Tawa glanced at the council elders, who nodded. From his pack, he produced several folded papers, yellowed and creased. The letters were written in a mix of Apache and English, their contents shadowy and ambiguous. Nayeli examined the letters, her mind racing. Some phrases were vague, others suggested negotiations, but nothing proved betrayal. She spoke slowly. These letters show attempts at dialogue. I sought to protect my people through diplomacy, not betrayal. The council debated fiercely, torn between doubt and hope. Then, from the crowd, a young woman stepped forward, a member of Nayeli's own family. Her voice trembled as she said, I fear Tawa is right. Our people must be protected. The village's tension snapped like a wire. Shouts erupted, some calling for Nayeli's capture, others demanding calm. In the chaos, a group of men from the posse surged forward. Intent on seizing Nayeli, Elijah acted quickly, stepping between them, raising his rifle. Back off. She's under the council's protection. But the posse wasn't deterred. Guns were drawn, threats shouted. The air thickened with fear and fury. Nayeli's heart pounded as she realized the fragile peace had shattered. Then, from the side, a sharp crack echoed a rifle shot. A man in the crowd fell, and pandemonium broke loose. Elijah grabbed Nayeli's arm. We have to get out of here, now. They ran toward the ranch, the chaos of the village behind them. As they fled, Nayeli's mind churned with betrayal. Tawa, once a friend, had turned his back on her. The settlers' greed and fear had sparked violence. Yet, amid the dust and blood, Elijah's steady presence was a beacon. Back at the ranch, they barricaded the doors and windows, preparing for what would come next. The night was thick with tension, the howling wind carrying distant echoes of conflict. Elijah looked at Nayeli, his voice low but resolute. They want to break us, but we're stronger than they think. Nayeli met his gaze, feeling a flicker of hope. Then we fight, not just for survival, but for justice. Outside, the desert whispered a warning. The battle was far from over. Blood and dust. The sun had barely risen when the first shots rang out, echoing across the barren landscape like thunder in a storm. Elijah crouched behind a fallen log, his rifle steady in his hands as bullets tore into the dry earth around him. Nayeli was close by, her breath steady despite the chaos unfolding. They had barely slept, bracing for an attack they knew was coming ever since the village erupted in violence. The posse, fueled by fear and greed, had returned with more men armed and merciless. Elijah glanced at Nayeli. "We need to hold them off until the tribe can regroup." She nodded, eyes sharp. "They don't want justice. They want to kill me." His grip tightened on the rifle. "Then we'll make sure they don't get the chance." Gunfire crackled as the posse advanced, their faces grim, their hatred evident. Elijah and Nayeli fired back, their shots precise but cautious, aimed to warn, not to kill if they could help it. Behind the cover of the ranch house, a sudden explosion of dust and gravel signaled reinforcements, arriving members of the Apache tribe who refused to accept the injustice against Nayeli. Among them was Tawa, his expression conflicted but resolute. The battle quickly turned into a chaotic melee, a desperate struggle for survival where old loyalties clashed with new alliances. Elijah found himself fighting not just for the woman beside him but for a future where such bloodshed could end. At one point, Tawa's voice cut through the din. "Stop this madness. We must find peace." Elijah lowered his rifle slightly, looking at the hunter who had once been Nayeli's friend and now her accuser. "If you want peace, help us stop this." Tawa nodded. "I will." As the dust settled, it became clear the violence had reached a stalemate. Both sides were weary, but neither willing to back down. In the aftermath, Elijah tended to the wounded, while Nayeli faced the bitter reality that trust was fragile, and enemies could be found even among friends. That night, by the fire, Elijah spoke quietly. "You changed things today. They saw you fight, not just run." Nayeli smiled faintly. Maybe that's what they needed to see, the truth in action. But Elijah's smile was tinged with concern. This won't be the last fight. The desert stretched endlessly before them, vast and indifferent. Yet beneath its harsh surface lay the possibility of new beginnings. For Nayeli, the path ahead was uncertain. But with Elijah by her side, she was ready to face whatever came. Together, they would stand against the shadows of the past and fight for a future where justice and honor could prevail. Dawn of a new path. A first light of dawn crept over the horizon, casting a golden glow across the rugged landscape. The battle was over, but the wounds, both visible and unseen, lingered in the heavy silence that hung around the ranch. Nayeli sat quietly by the fire, her blistered feet resting on a cool stone, her dark eyes reflecting the flickering flames. Around her, the remnants of the conflict lay scattered: spent cartridges, broken branches, and the deep scars etched into the earth. Elijah joined her, carrying a small pot of water and a cloth to tend to her feet. His touch was gentle, his voice low. "You survived the fire and the fight. You've earned more than just survival, Nayeli." She looked up, meeting his steady gaze. "What comes next?" "The tribe still fears me. The settlers hate me. And Tawa, even he doubts me." Elijah shook his head. "Change is never easy, but you've shown them strength and truth. The story doesn't end here." Outside the ranch, the village began to stir, some returning to rebuild, others departing with heavy hearts. The council elders convened once more, determined to find a path forward. Nayeli's trial and survival had unsettled old beliefs and opened difficult conversations. Tawa approached the ranch cautiously. His face was grave but softened by something like respect. "Nayeli, I was wrong to turn against you. Fear clouded my judgment. Will you forgive me?" Nayeli studied him, the weight of betrayal heavy but the possibility of healing stronger. "I forgive, but trust must be earned." He nodded, understanding the gravity of her words. Elijah stepped forward. "We need to work together for the tribe, the settlers, and this land." The three stood in uneasy alliance, a symbol of hope, amid scars and history. Days passed, and slowly, the desert breathed new life. The settlers and tribe members began tentative talks, mediated by Nayeli and Elijah. The ranch became a meeting place, not a battlefield. Nayeli found herself at the heart of something greater than survival, the chance to build a bridge between worlds. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Elijah and Nayeli stood side by side, watching the sky blaze with colors of hope. "I never imagined I'd find peace here," Nayeli said softly. Elijah smiled. "Sometimes, peace finds you when you least expect it." Their hands brushed a quiet promise of solidarity and shared future. The land around them, harsh and beautiful, whispered stories of resilience and renewal. Nayeli's journey from hunted outcast to beacon of hope had transformed not only her fate but the destiny of all who called this rugged land home. And as the stars began to shimmer overhead, a new dawn rose not just in the sky, but in the hearts of those brave enough to fight for it.